I want to welcome everybody to We the People, a conversation series from the Film Society of Minneapolis, St. Paul. So if you're interested, make sure you check in with the mnfilmsociety.org. That's mnfilm.org for any information. I want to thank you for all you joining us today. We have a filmmaker that I find fascinating, and I've known for a long time, but even in the length of time that I've known him, I find him fascinating. I want to thank people who have helped us bring this forward. Bill and Penny George Foundation, Kelly and Mike Palmer, and Knock Inc. And anybody who is a member of the Film Society, for your membership helps to bring these programs to us. And I also want to thank IFC Films for providing this film for us. And I also want to say something that I just found out about is that we have Sam Pollard with this. He also has a retrospect airing at Lincoln Film Center right now. And it goes on for, I think, for about a week. It's virtual, so anybody can go to it and see the films that he has created over the years. So Sam, thank you for coming. I appreciate this deeply. I think that one of the things that I have really found as I did more research on you, not that I needed to do a lot, but I did do some, is that I was really surprised by the amount of work you've done. There's like 19 directing credits, another 48 producing credits, and I tried to add up your editing credits. There's like 75 editing credits. So it's an amazing body of work, and you've been involved in some films that we've actually shown here at the Film Society, even in our festivals, like Mr. Soul, the Sammy Davis Jr., I Gotta Be Me, which I thought was great, the Atlanta Atlanta Missing and Murdered and Lost Children, which I thought was great. August Wilson. At the film I never saw, but I wanted to see because I'm a huge John Ford fan. I remember us talking about John Ford. I wanted to see the John Ford film, but I haven't seen that yet. Slavery by Another Name, which you worked in production here with TPT. You also did, you worked on a number of films with Spike Lee, specifically as an editor and producer. The Levees Broke. And you also teach at NYU, and you've done that since 2000, I think, or longer?
1994.
94? Okay, so you've been doing it a long time.
26 years, man.
So when do you get a chance to make these movies is my question to you.
Well, Craig, I don't sleep much, man. I go to bed at like 12:31 a.m. I get up at like 6 or 7. I'm back, at the machine here, working, thinking of new ideas, promoting, thoughts, trying to write treatments, get proposals out. I'm not editing as much anymore. I think I haven't really edited anything myself since 2015.
Oh, really? Okay. I mean, you're such an incredible editor. I mean, just for those who know, Sam edited Half Past Autumn, the film I did on Gordon Parks, and I mean, I just thought your perception, which is obviously helps you as a director and as a producer to pick the right kind of projects, but you have one of the strongest sensibilities. I remember when I was at HBO, they asked me, who do I want? And I said, I want Sam. You were working on another project, so I thought I would lost you, but luckily we were delayed long enough so that you could actually join it, I want to talk a little bit about this film here. It opens on Friday at MLK FBI. It's a film that I think is of our time. Unfortunately, it's a film really of our time. I mean, we as Black people, and I think what white people don't understand is that Black people in America are getting tired of this. We try and we try and we try, and it seems like it doesn't change. I've read the COINTELPRO book because of another project that I'm working on. So I know that this COINTELPRO process of the FBI goes back to the 1990 with Marcus Garvey and then the Puerto Rican Liberation Front, and then it plows its way up through obviously King and then into into the Black Panthers. It just seems like if you're not obeying, which is kind of what it is, you're a communist or a socialist, and so thus you're unpatriotic. And we know now being patriotic is a code word for being white. you know, and I think that in your film, it comes out really clear that the use of Martin Luther King, the description of him being a communist was part of the negativity that started to spur this investigation and this implementation of the the intellectual process of trying to destroy him. What brought this film to you? How did you get involved in this film?
In 2017, the producer of this film, Benedine, had read a book by the historian David Garrow that was about MLK and J. Edgar Hoover and the FBI monitoring King and the obsession that J. Edgar Hoover had with the Communist Party. And he said to me after he read the book, Sam, I think we found our next film, because we had just finished the film titled Two Trains Running. It was 1964 search for two iconic blues musicians in Mississippi, Son House and Skip James, at the height of the civil rights movement in Mississippi, Mississippi summer.
Yeah.
And we had done that film, so we were looking for a new film to do. So I got a copy of the book. I read the book, and I called Ben up immediately, and I said, "You're absolutely right. This is a film that should be done. We should make this into a film." So we reached out to David Garrow. We took an option out on the book. Then we flew out to Pittsburgh a few months later. We brought a camera crew over to his house. We spent about 4 hours sitting with David, having him talk about the genesis of the book, the FBI and Hoover and King, and the surveilling of King during those years. And that interview became sort of the basis, the framework for the film we wanted to make. So we then put together a sizzle reel, put together a proposal and budget, and we knocked on the doors of the usual suspects trying to find funding. And we got no love, and so we were sort of, trying to figure out how we were going to raise the money to do this independent documentary. And then in 2019, early 2019, two funders came along, a company called Field of Vision, another company called Play Action. They loved our proposal, they loved the sizzle, and they came on board with the funding, which enabled us to shoot the rest of the interviews in the fall of 2019. Hire an editor, a woman named Laura Tomaselli, hire archival producers, Sheila Manair and a gentleman named Brian Becker, and open up the editing room to start editing in late November, early December. And we really ratcheted it up in January, February. And we had a day or two to do these recreations we had shot of, FBI monitoring King's, tape, reel-to-reel tapes, a lot of ephemera from the period, photos and other gadgets. And the day before we were going to shoot that stuff on a stage in Brooklyn, my production designer came up to me and said he was so worried about COVID that if we didn't get everything shot the next day when we were supposed to, because we had planned for 2 days of shooting, but he said if we couldn't get everything done in one day, he was going to leave, and I would be without a production designer. So the next day, we came in early, Craig. We spent 12 hours shooting as much as we could in this stage. Well, the ephemera, we had these actors dressed up. We had them working at their desk, going through files. We shot all this stuff impressionistically. And at the end of that day, we wrapped. I jumped in an Uber and I went home. I live in the village. And the next day after that, the city got closed down.
Uh-huh. You were lucky there.
The city was closed down.
Right.
So my editor, she decided she was going to work remotely upstate. She had a house upstate, so her and her husband drove upstate. And from March until the end of July, she was editing remotely, sending cuts to myself and to the producer, Ben. We would give her notes. She would make the changes. She would send us another cut. We'd give her notes, make more changes. We started getting a little worried about the schedule. Would we make the schedule, because there was so much to cover, so much footage to look at. And she finally had a cut that was over 2.5 hours. And then we had to really, know that we couldn't make a film that was going to be 2.5 hours long. We had to make some very, as hard decisions about what to take out, what to lose, which we did. Yeah. And by the end of July, we had to cut down to like a little hour 46, maybe cut a few more minutes. And then we sent it to Toronto. And, I've done a lot of films, Greg. This is the first time I had a film that got so much love immediately. I mean, Toronto said yes. Telluride said yes. New York Film Festival said yes. Doc NYC said yes. I mean, All these other festivals said yes. This was like, wow, you know, a snowball running down the hill and building and building and building and building. So it's been sort of an amazing ride. And then IFC came on board as a distributor, and they've done a fantastic job doing the rollout for this film. I mean, it's been phenomenal.
Yes, it's really, I mean, I got to thank them for doing this because, you know, again, you and I have been talking about, I've been trying to get this film since September, so it's been a process.
I know.
Yeah, so, but it's great to have this. So in the process of, you know, again, it's hard to make these kind of cuts when you're dealing with such an intricate historical project like this, and you had to take things out that, and ultimately what you want to do is to tell the most accurate truth that you possibly can of the situation, but still keep the impact of it. Those decisions of cutting certain things out of there, what were sort of the criteria for doing that?
Was it slowing down the narrative? You know, even though there was interesting information, was it slowing down the narrative? Because, you know, I'm a strong believer that the way to keep your audience engaged is to create a film that has a very strong narrative flow, and you try not to lag in terms of the pacing. And so if the film was being slowed down by certain things that we thought was interesting initially, we excised them, we took them out because we wanted to make sure that we kept the audience engaged in the material as it unfolded.
Yeah. And was there stuff that you think now that you've seen the finished version that should be in there that would help to make the film more impactful?
I have a philosophy, Craig.
Mm-hmm.
I have amnesia after I make a film. My amnesia prohibits me from thinking about what I took out. So I don't remember what I took out.
Yeah, right. That's probably healthy. That's probably really healthy to do that, because you can sit there and commiserate about, you know, if only that was there. Yeah.
No, I don't do that, man.
Yeah.
You know me. I'm looking for the next project.
The next project. I mean, in this process, so for you in the researching for this, I know there was the book. What other kind of research did you do? How extensive was that?
I picked up a copy. I have it someplace in my office here.
Mm-hmm.
I picked up a huge copy about the history of the FBI and J. Edgar Hoover, mm-hmm. which I could read. Mm-hmm. And then Ben Hadeen got the transcripts from the Freedom of Information Act from the audio tapes, which we were able to look through and see what we wanted to select and choose. A lot of it was redacted, but there was stuff that we still thought that's in the film that we could use. And then we spoke very close with a couple of their stories who ended up being in the film. And that was Beverly Gage, who really, her strength is the FBI, the history of the FBI and J. Edgar Hoover. And then we talked to this other historian, Donna Murch, whose real focus in history is COINTELPRO and the impact of COINTELPRO in the 60s and 70s on the Nation of Islam, on the Black Panther Party, on Angela Davis, and how the FBI not only monitored and wiretapped and bugged these places where people congregated, but also had informants, who were in there working for the FBI. As you saw in the film, we mentioned one of the great civil rights photographers of all time, Ernest Withers, being an informant for the FBI.
Yeah, that turning people against, again, obviously there's sometimes, and I know this because of the Black Panthers, they used, possibly, decreased prison time and things like that to get people to get in there to do that. I mean, along with paying them and things like that. But it's such a crime, that they did that, but they really seriously felt they need this. I remember, one of the things that I had done on the Black Panthers, there was a FBI agent that actually talked to J. Edgar Hoover about stopping doing that. He felt that it was degrading to the FBI itself by doing this. But J. Edgar Hoover obviously was obsessed with this process. I know in your film, you talk about J. Edgar Hoover a little bit, but it really is, he's the impetus behind this whole process of trying to bring down Martin Luther. And I'm not sure if you got more into that than was in the film.
No, I think, listen, here, it's interesting about J. Edgar Hoover. You were talking about this right before, we start in your introduction.
Mm-hmm.
J. Edgar Hoover is really a stand-in for the majority of white people who basically said, think about it this way, Craig. Mm-hmm. They said, oh my God, here's a black man in 1963 standing up at the Lincoln Memorial saying, I have a dream. That we should be a part of Americans mainstream. where for the last 40 years, we didn't notice these black people. You know, they were on the fringes. They would come and work for us. You know, they would clean our houses, take care of our babies, drive our cars, you know, but then they'd go back to their own communities. We didn't have to deal with them. If they wanted to get on the bus or get on the train, we said to them, you can't sit with us. You got to sit in the back. If they want to go to a restaurant, you can't come in here. You know, it's for whites only. You know, you got to find your own restaurant. All of a sudden, here's a man with his comrades basically saying, we want to change. You know, and I know, anytime America has to confront change, resistance, and the fact that they saw Martin Luther King as a radical says a lot about this country.
Yeah.
Talk about somebody, a radical whose whole agenda was nonviolent protest.
Yeah.
You know, and then you hear some statement that he's the most dangerous Negro in America.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, man, that's pretty frightening.
Yeah, because good.
But it's what's in the American DNA. You know, it's like what we saw last week at the Capitol building. Those people breaking into the Capitol. You know, and I know that's not an anomaly, man.
Yeah.
White people have been doing that for years. I mean,
Yeah.
they would go into black communities just because somebody looked at they said a black man looked at a white woman the wrong way. They'd go in and destroy your community and kill you. Mm-hmm. You know, how dare you? If you want to be empowered, you want to have your own buildings and businesses, that's going to be, you know, we're not going to let that happen. Yeah. Tulsa Race Massacre, 1921.
Yeah.
Black soldiers coming home after World War I, the Red Summer of 1919. Mm-hmm. You know, the riot in Rosewood. I mean, we see it time and time and time again, you know. And one of the things that's fascinating also that makes this film so resonant, when King and A. Philip Randolph and the other members of the Big Six decided they were going to do that march in Washington, Washington, D.C., the federal government was terrified. They were terrified. So they obviously came out in force just in case anything was going to happen. When the Black Lives Matter people were protesting in the summer of 2020, and you've seen these images again, mm-hmm. right?
Mm-hmm.
On the Capitol steps, the National Guard is shoulder to shoulder,
mm-hmm.
right?
3 deep.
That's right. No way was anybody going to get past that National Guard and go up those Capitol steps. Last week, this is in white people's head, man. Mm-hmm. They say, "Oh, it's just white people." You know, what are they going to do? We saw what they did.
Yeah. It's you know, it is, you know, for us, it's just another day in America.
That's right.
And, you know, and you look at this and say, you know, and again, it's for white people. Then I hope that they see this, they see the naive aspect when they say there's no such thing as white privilege. I mean, it's you can't even say that word again. It's you know,
can't say it.
You know, it's not the tooth fairy. This is real. You just saw it, and we didn't have any, and we had nothing to do with it.
Nothing at all. Nothing at all, man.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that it's so interesting that you're talking about this, because, you know, we come from a generation, you know, there was Martin Luther King and then there was Malcolm X. Most young black men were into Malcolm X because it was like, okay, we're going to do this. Let's, you know, and or the Black Panthers, and Martin was a little passive, and so we didn't see him being not only a threat, but we didn't even see that he would be able to accomplish anything. And as we got older, we started to see he may be right. One thing, I did a thing with Bernice King, Dr. Bernice King, just the other day, an interview with her, and she was talking about how Coretta was really, the nonprofit part of it was really came out of her. Mm-hmm. You know, the idea of that, and really push that into Martin, that we needed to do that, because it wasn't naturally his approach, which is interesting. You know, he came from being a black man. It's like, okay, we need to do something here. And she really convinced him that this was the way to do that, which I think was smart and eloquent and as obviously was needed. Did you find in your tapes and listening that Martin felt that this approach, because he's obviously on the tapes, that the approach wasn't working the way he would like for it to work, or wasn't working to the level he would like it to work?
We didn't hear we didn't hear anything like that in the tapes. I mean, I think he was a man who was very smart and understood how to sort of maneuver around anyone who thought he was radical, even though, it's amazing that people thought he was radical.
Mm-hmm.
He was really radical to the way we see it, the way we perceive radical, you know. But I think he was just very strategic and intelligent about how he decided to maneuver among white people. I mean, I thought that his answers to this white woman in that show that we take a segment from, where she asked him, "Don't you feel that your protests are leading, your peaceful protests are leading to the riots in the cities, Dr. King? Aren't you moving too fast, Dr. King?" I mean, I thought his answers were eloquent, articulate, and no rancor at all. I mean, he knew how to basically talk to these people and not let them really get under his skin. Amazing to me. I wouldn't have been able to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I think that was good, because the fact that he obviously had this, I guess it is the intelligence and the calmness to basically respond to that without any anger. I mean, again, he was abused, so it wasn't like he wasn't walking around all the time. He had been jailed, he had been hit, he had been, shot at, he had been, so it wasn't like there wasn't aggression towards him. But to be calm about that takes a certain courage. Yeah, it's amazing to me. Yeah. He in your film, one of the things about your film that I did like also was giving the perspective about him and the organization, because A. Philip Randolph was, a lot of people, if you're not sure, you should check out A. Philip Randolph and who he really was. He and Barrett found Martin. I mean, he's a 20-some-year kid in the South, and they basically knew they needed somebody that had a younger voice. And Barrett was gay, and openly gay as a Black man, and wasn't going to stop. That was another thing, that they knew that they couldn't have him.
Yeah, it wasn't going to work.
Yeah. But in that process, they found somebody who had the right kind of feeling. I mean, talk about casting, they picked the right person.
You saw that footage of him when he does an interview with that reporter in Montgomery?
Mm-hmm.
I never saw that footage before, man.
Yeah.
He's like sharp, looking good.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking eloquently. Wow.
Yeah. I think a lot of people don't understand he was in his 20s, which is like, I
know, man.
I mean, you think of him as being this older man, but he just had that kind of age of wisdom to him. In your process of making this film, what was it that really directed you? What was sort of the thematic aspect of the film that you were going for?
The thematic aspect was to create this, what I call, and I like to do this, create this sort of parallel story. The unfolding and the ascendancy of Dr. King at the same time as the FBI and Edgar Hoover are trying to figure out how to dispose of him. It's back and forth. And that was sort of the arc that we wanted to create to lead to this sort of, basically this collision course where he finally meets Edgar Hoover after Hoover has called him the most notorious liar in America. And then basically the fact that they kept monitoring and surveilling King up until his assassination. That's when they stopped, because as one of the former agents we interviewed, Chuck Knox, says in the film, anytime King and his associates were going to go to a new city, the FBI had all hands on deck, to really sort of, monitor King's every moment, every waking moment. They had agents bugging those hotels, wiretapping those rooms. They wanted to keep constant monitoring of Dr. King, which begs the question, though, Craig, if they were monitoring King so closely, how come they weren't aware of a man with a rifle who was going to assassinate Dr. King?
Yeah.
I mean, it really doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it doesn't. I mean, and there, Dr. Jones, who was in your film, who I interviewed last year, or something
Clarence,
else. Yeah, who has the same theory that you do, and I'm not a conspiratorial person, but there is a conspiracy to the assassination of Dr. King. There's no way that they did not know that it was going to happen, because he talks about it clearly, is that they were on him all the time. I mean, all the time, day and night, surveilling the neighborhood. They knew everybody that was associated with him. They were, there's no way that anybody would have got within 2 blocks of him to do anything harmful, less, because they were looking, they weren't trying to prevent somebody from doing something. They were always waiting for, the Communist Party to engage with him, or whatever. So So it's interesting. In that process, you know, I know that there was a plan to, part of the plan was just to find out what he was doing. And I think that's in the first series of it. Then there was a decision to use information, falsifying and manipulating his relationship with his wife, obviously to disrupt him as a person. In that process of finding that, I don't know, in your film, it doesn't seem like it was successful because obviously Coretta and Martin were together the whole time. How did that sort of roll out? I mean, I think they wanted, and this was in your film too, they were looking for him to commit suicide.
That's the intimation.
Yeah.
Yeah, that they wanted him to kill himself. I mean, here they're initially trying to connect him to Stanley Levinson, who had been a former communist. They wanted to see if he was, he was flirting with communism. And if that was the case, then they could really take him down. When they realized that wasn't going to stick, and they learned that he was, obviously having these other relationships with other women, they said, "Uh-oh, we got it. Here's a minister, the major spokesman of his community, of the civil rights movement, having these tawdry affairs. This should take him down." But the thing they didn't reckon with was that back in the early 60s, the press, not like today, man, didn't go into these people's personal lives. They didn't publish the tawdry things or supposed tawdry things about people's personal lives. They didn't look into JFK and his affairs he was having in the White House. They didn't look at the King's personal life. So they didn't, J. Edgar Hoover and Sullivan couldn't make it stick. So what do? Hoover decides, let's create a letter. Let's create a letter basically saying, "Dr. King, we know who you are. We know what you're doing. You're horrible, you're this, you're that, and you know what to do. You know what to do, Dr. King." And then on top of it, man, they send the tape. And who knows if the tape was doctored or not. But supposedly the tape is King with some other female. They send it to his wife, Coretta Scott King, So, I mean, the FBI is supposed to be our national police and supposed to be doing things the legal way. And here they're going out of their way to do something illegal in the hopes of really helping, to discredit Dr. King. That's a long, dusty road they've gone down, man. A road of criminality. That's for one reason why James Comey says in the film, as far as he was concerned, this was the darkest period in the history of the FBI. Now, I'm too cynical to believe it is the only darkest period. But if Comey wants to say...
It's close to one of them, is what you're saying.
Right.
It is. I mean, and I think that you're probably right. That's probably the media was not going to pick up on it because they weren't. They didn't do those kind of things because there had been the rumors of Kennedy and the issues around that scenario, and then they weren't getting into that even and I guess the FBI couldn't force the media to even get into it. It just wasn't where they were at.
The media didn't do it. But it's so funny though, Craig. Here we are in 2021. And the media, they dig into everybody's life, and you would think about it this way, you would think that all the scandal that's been attached to Donald Trump, that it would stick. But it did, nothing stuck, man. Nothing stuck. I mean, you would think that if that tape of him on the bus had come out in the 60s and the 70s and 80s when the news was starting to do that, that would have destroyed his career. Yeah. But now it didn't do a thing. Yeah. It had no impact, man.
Yeah. The one of the things that I think that also sending it to his wife, I mean, Coretta, I mean, I don't know what her response was to it other than she decided to stand by her man. And again, talking to Dr. Bernice, I learned a lot about Coretta. She wasn't this this weak woman. She had this was her movement too, along with Martin. Martin just happened to be the front person for this because it was the time in the world that a man, was going to be the front. But she was strong. I think she felt that it was their movement together. And whatever he was doing, he needed to stop doing it so there was a bigger picture. Did you find that at all in your research?
No, we didn't. Did Bernice tell you that there's some kind of audio tapes, or
No,
did
no,
Coretta
no.
Scott keep a diary or something? There?
Sure, I think she kept a diary, but I don't know if she didn't. I don't think she had audio tapes, but just talking to. I mean, again, because it was one of those things where it's like, why didn't she just leave him? Well, again,
Well,
when she talked, when she talked to me about, I'm sure people felt that way, and I think that's what the FBI wanted. They were trying to disrupt his
yeah, but
life.
and I know, man. This was the '60s,
Mm-hmm,
and
mm-hmm,
he was a pillar of the community.
mm-hmm,
She,
mm-hmm,
whatever he was doing, and you and I know she wasn't probably happy with it,
mm-hmm,
but there was a role that she felt she had to play,
mm-hmm,
and you're right, she was a very strong part of the movement.
mm-hmm.
So I
Yeah.
I would have been surprised that Coretta Scott King would have left Martin Luther King.
Yeah, I think so too. Do you think, but the FBI truly believed that was going to happen? They truly believed that
Well,
was going to happen, or he was going to commit suicide. They obviously underestimated him and
yeah,
their
they
relation.
believed that they were hoping that it would be such a break in the relationship, like by sending this tape, that it would really upend him, both emotionally and psychically. But it didn't work. Didn't have the impact they thought it was going to have, and that's what's fascinating. That nothing they did really had the impact they were hoping they would have.
Yeah. Yeah, it's in this process. I forgot when the tapes are supposed to be cleared as a
2027.
27. And this is in a process of sort of, they felt that they could sort of control the Black population. Do you think that in this process of that, they assumed that in the assassination of King, or maybe they didn't understand to what level King was so powerful in the Black community, that it would ultimately create a riot? Do you think part of it was that, or do you think that was just the aftermath of it, the
Well, I'm
assassination?
sorry. Wait.
I'm saying, do you think that the FBI knew that I mean, this is part of what, in this new world we live in right now, this race war that is supposed to end all this, is part of the motivation behind a lot of things that happen in this country right now. Do you think the FBI was trying to stimulate and move towards this race war that would ultimately put us back in the box?
I think I would say they were hoping that we would turn on Dr. King and destroy him, so he wouldn't be a powerful leader anymore. I think that's what they were hoping. I think that was the motivation for why they created that letter. That's why they sent that tape. They felt that if the Black community turned on King, that would really marginalize him and destroy his effectiveness in making change in America. I think that's what they wanted.
Yeah. Yeah, that didn't work either. So it was a failed pursuit. So to your point, to the thematic aspect of your film, I mean, it only created King as a greater hero in not just in Black America, but America in general, probably in the world. I mean, he's
a world-class hero.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
World-class hero.
In this process of doing this film, what were some of the things that you learned about King that you didn't know before, just in the general research?
I think the biggest thing I came away with was that he was human like us, man. And like all of us, Craig, he had a lot of stuff going on in his life. He was juggling a lot of balls. And it's amazing that he kept them all up, man. Because, many of us are doing the same thing with our lives. We're juggling lots of things. So think of it this way. Here's a young, 27-year-old minister is thrown into becoming the leader of the Montgomery bus boycott. Here's a young man who a few years later creates his own organization, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, with the goal of going into Southern cities to break the back of segregation. Here's a man who learns and understands that he's being monitored and observed by the FBI, on a daily basis, even though Clarence Jones says he didn't want to believe it at first, but I think he always knew. Here's a man who, helps to get the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act passed. At the same time as he's going from city to city in the South and in the North, he has also this very sort of complicated personal life. Here's a man who by 1967 decides to come out against the war in Vietnam, knowing full well, he wasn't blind, knowing full well the reverberations would have within the civil rights community and what it would mean to his alliance with the Johnson administration, who was pro-Vietnam. I mean, this is a lot to have on your plate. So when you see him in the film, when you see sort of a weariness kind of in his face before he speaks in some of these archival clips, I imagine it's because he was juggling so much, like many of us. And when I was a young man in the 60s, I just thought of him as he's this great civil rights leader, and that's all he's focused on. Obviously, he wasn't, like many of us. I was April 2nd, 1968, Craig, I turned 18 years old. 2 days later, I'm in my parents' apartment, and Walter Cronkite, who you know was the American spokesman for the news, pops on television and says, April 4th, Dr. Martin Luther King was just assassinated in Memphis, Tennessee at the Lorraine Motel. Wow, man. Because in my household, Craig, I don't know about your household, we had 3 pictures on our wall in the city. Martin Luther King, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, and Jesus Christ. Yeah. Those are the pictures we had in our house, man.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah, he was up there. Yeah, that's exactly. I think that's probably, you know, those that was the thing, and you know, and it was those 3 pictures were a worship, you know, point.
That's right.
You know,
that's right.
And perhaps because we felt as Black people, you felt those are the 3 people that were going to save you. You know, and we had already lost, you know, I mean, again,
lost JFK.
JFK early on in the game. And so at least, you know, Jesus before that. So, you know, Martin's still there. So we're going to, you know, yeah. It was, I mean, it was a time, you know, and I have to totally admit that I was younger than you during this. So I was going to end up Malcolm first, you know, the Nation of Islam. And because again, it's, you know, by any means necessary, I was, you know, ready to, do the dog of Babylon kind of approach to this, but you know, that's part of youth, you know, but I got into King more as you read it, as Malcolm X did a lot of, you know, I have this picture with the 2 of them together laughing, you know, obviously it's later on in both their lives, but they basically sort of came around to understanding each other.
Sure,
you know?
That's right.
You know, one of the things that is in your film is this aspect of King, when King, and I don't know that he did this on purpose, but when C.D. decided that he realized that being against the Vietnam War, which was, I think, frightened everybody, they was for it, because it meant there was no longer just a Black thing. It was actually, you know, an anti-war thing. It was actually a liberal approach to what it was. In your process, was there an action that possibly led to his ultimate assassination?
I don't think there's one action. I think there are people who wanted to assassinate King many times. And remember, he was stabbed by that woman when he was in Harlem.
Yeah.
I think there was always people out there who wanted to assassinate Dr. King. I mean, again, you just have to ask ourselves, why was it the FBI who were monitoring King not aware of this man or whoever was involved with this assassination on King? I think that in King, as we show in the film, when he read those pictures in Ramparts magazine of these children in Vietnam who were living in horrific conditions and suffering these horrible burns, I think he said in his heart and his mind, enough is enough. America shouldn't be over there. What's the point of us being in Vietnam? We have so much to do here in America. Why are we fighting that war? And I think that's why he took that stance he took at Riverside Church in '67.
Yeah, but it did make him more of a target and less sympathetic.
Sure. Not only even within the civil rights world, they thought he had lost his way. How come? Why are you having this agenda when you should be more concerned about what's happening in the movement? Now you're going to take on Vietnam.
What is it about films in general for yourself personally that sort of what's your desire in making films? Obviously you're hugely successful, hugely accomplished as a filmmaker. What is it that drives you to selecting the films you make? Because if I look at the body of work, even the stuff you've done, a lot of stuff you've even done with Spike, it all is about something, you know, and I can't say that about most filmmakers, you know. Then, you know, the films they make are not always about something. They're just basically stories that they want to tell. But yours are life-changing exposures to social situations and significant in their workings.
I would say to you quite clearly, it all goes back to 1980. I had just come off a film in California, editing this low-budget boxing movie for a director named George Bowers. And he says to me, there's a gentleman in New York who's looking for an editor. He's doing a film about the blues scene in Chicago. And his name is St. Clair Born.
Mm.
And he introduced me to Saint, and I started editing with Saint. And sitting in that editing room for, I guess, 6 months with Saint on this film, Craig, you know, up to this point, I had said to myself, you know, I've been in the business about 8 years, and I had said to myself, you know, when people reach out to say, ask me who am I would say, I'm an editor. Don't define me as a Black editor. I just want to be an editor. And I'm not concerned about our stories. I just want to make good films. But sitting in that room with Saint for 6 months, Saint made me again understand something I had known in my teens, I had forgotten in my early 20s, that as a young African-American editor, watching this wizened documentary filmmaker, you know, who basically said, it's important that we tell our stories, because if we don't, no one will, and they won't get it right. And listening to Saint go on and on about that over and over again for 6 months, man, it seeped into my brain that you're right. I got to be more responsible as a filmmaker. You know, I got to be challenged to take on projects that we're telling our stories. And from that point on, I mean, you know, Saint was a major inspiration and mentor for me. You know that, man.
Yeah, he was for me too. Yeah.
So, you know, when I worked with Saint on Langston Hughes or The Black and the Green, and then I went and worked on Eyez On the Prize, and then all of a sudden Spike called me, and you know how Spike is like Saint, you know, right. Working with him on these, you know, really aggressive political type films, dramas, you know, it just sort of reinforced the responsibility I have. So by the time, you know, working on Half Past Autumn, or working on The Rise and Fall of Jim Crow, or working on I'll Make Me a World, or working on, you know, the doc about even Marvin Gaye or Sammy Davis or August Wilson, you know, Slavery by Another Name, you know, this is a responsibility I take seriously as a filmmaker. We have to tell our stories, because if we don't, me and you and Stanley Nelson and others, you know, they'll get told in ways we don't like.
Yeah, that's very true. I mean, Saint was so influential. I mean, you know, here I am in Minneapolis as, you know, as a teenager wanting to make films, but not knowing exactly how to do it. And, you know, he used to send out what was called the Chamba notes.
That's right.
And so he used to send them to me, you know, and I mean, it was my, you know, my sort of entry into filmmaking from a Black point of view. I mean, and he was educating filmmakers, even people who wanted to be a filmmaker. I wasn't a filmmaker, I was still a musician at that time. And he was trying to educate me into the process of respecting the business and respecting filmmaking and respecting who you are as a Black man and the power of that. You have the right. And he told me one thing, you have the right to make a film. Okay. And I don't think I totally saw that. I saw it as, you know, there, you know, again, like I told you, you know, I have incredible respect for John Ford and
me too,
Truffaut, and you know, but you know, you can do that too, you know. And I think that was one of the key components to really pushing through the hard times, even when, you know. So yeah, and then you know, I stayed with him in LA for a while when I was at USC. I stayed in his apartment, you know, and you know, so he's always was really, really supportive of whatever I wanted to do, and an educator, and at the same time, not just a filmmaker, but an educator, not in the classroom, but just sitting with him and talking and having him, you know, telling you stories. But also, I think part of it came from his fact that his father was one of the first real Black journalists in this country. So
that's right.
You know, he had so much about, we need to tell our stories. This is, you know, you need to report, you need to capture, you need to say, you know, or it won't be told.
He's right. He's right, man.
Yeah. Then I think that if you look at the body of your work, you know, again, if people ever get a chance, you know, really go to the Lincoln Center, I don't know how many films that they're going to be showing, but you should definitely see, the body of your work, because it is it's a chronicle of Blacks in America on a significant level, Also, so people understand, is that the film is this film, MLK FBI, is going to start airing on Friday here in virtuals, but definitely check it out. You can go to mspfilm.org.
Are theaters open in Minneapolis?
Well, they're open on a certain level. I mean, I don't know the exact. They're in theaters, so it's a percentage level of people can go there. So on the 15th, it opens in theaters and online. So virtual, I should say.
So our theaters in New York are shut down, man.
Yeah, they have the theater that's just showing at here, and I don't get me lying about how many people can go see it, but it's got a limited amount of people that can go into the theater to watch the film. But however you do it either. I mean, it's the kind of film that needs to be seen and needs to be stories that need to be told. I want to talk a little bit more about the films you got coming, because again, this is another thing I love talking to you. It's like all of a sudden I've got 2 other films that are done that are going to be out in the next 2 weeks. You're getting to be like Roger Corman here. So.
Oh man, I'm like, no man, you gotta sound like Spike, man. Spike makes films like that, man.
I know. He's got like 2 films. He's making 2 films at the same time. I mean, He's amazing. He's always surprises it. So you got one coming out called Black Art in the Absence of Light, or Life?
Absence of Light.
Absence of Light. Yeah. What's that film about now again?
It's in 1976 at the Los Angeles County Museum of Art. An artist and curator named David Driscoll African-American artist and curator, put together an exhibit that documented African-American artists from the late 1900s to the middle of the 20th century. And he was able to show the works of Selma Burke, of Faith Ringgold, of Elizabeth Catlett, of Romeo Beard, and of Jacob Lawrence. And then what we did was use it as a framework to say, what was the influence and impact on artists of the 21st century, like the Astor Gates from Chicago, Kehinde Wiley, who did the Obama portrait, Amy Sherrill, who did Michelle Obama, Carol Walker, Carrie James Marshall out of Chicago, Carrie Mae Weems, Betty Saar. So we profiled some of these artists and the influence of that exhibit from 1976, and understanding other exhibits too, like Thelma Golden's Black Male exhibit at the Whitney, and then looking at places where Black art had flourished before the people in the mainstream understood where they were, basically in the HBCUs. So it's a real sort of dig into the African American art experience, and it's going to be on HBO February 9th. Premieres on HBO February 9th. And then then next year on American Masters, we're gonna premiere a film, Craig, that I've been working on since 1988. I started shooting this particular film in 1988. Saint and I had just finished, we were finishing up Langston Hughes, and Saint had shot a sequence in the film where he had Max Roach performing to one of Dr. King's poem, one of Dr. King's speeches, one of his I Have a Dream speeches. And after I cut that sequence, I had turned to Saint and I said, somebody should do a film on Max Roach. And Saint turned to me and said, you should. And I first said, me? Because I had never done a film before. This was 1983. And we reached out, he introduced me to Max, and I asked Max about documenting him, and Max said yes. And then we got some funding from the New York State Council of the Arts. And in '86, we started shooting Max with his percussion ensemble in Boom at a rehearsal session on 44th Street. So we shot that. And then we went with Max to San Diego, where he was composing a score for a contemporary version of Midsummer Night's Dream. So we shot him there. Then we were able to get money from his label at the time, which was Black Saint Records, which was based in Italy. And we got a chance to go with him to Milan, where he was woodwind and string orchestra were performing his music. So we shot that. And I put the film together in like 88, 89. And I looked at the cut, Craig. And I just started producing. I just come off of Eyez, and I was starting to work with Spike. And I looked at this first cut of the film. I was appalled. I thought it was absolutely atrocious, man. And I put it on the shelf. I put it away, and it took me 5 years to have the guts to take it out. That was like 95. I took it out. I shot some additional interviews. I cut those in. I looked at it again. I was still appalled. I put it away for like 8 years, man. 10 years I put it away. And then about 4 or 5 years ago, a buddy of mine who's a filmmaker, camera person, who had also studied drums and had interviewed Max a lot on the radio, he said, you know, I know you got this Max Roach footage. Let me take a look at it. Maybe with my audio and your footage, we could think about a film about Max. So around 2014, 15, I showed him my footage. He said, there's a film in there. We should try to make a film. And then we decided we needed to do some more additional interviews. So we went out and shot Randy Weston. We interviewed Jimmy Heath. We interviewed Sonny Rollins. We interviewed Dee Dee Bridgewater. You know, I mean, it was like fantastic. We interviewed like 12 people, all musicians who had worked with Max, man. We went to Germany and interviewed Abdullah Ibrahim, you know. We interviewed all these musicians. We were able to raise enough money to find an editor because I didn't want to cut it myself. We brought an editor on last year who cut and cut and cut and cut, and finally got a cut that we felt was pretty good. We've been tweaking it. You know, I finally sent it to American Masters in the fall. And right before Christmas, Michael Cantor said they wanted to take it.
That's great.
That's great. So it's like, wow.
Yeah.
After almost 30 years, finally my Max Roach film.
It's funny because, I know Raul, his son, and I remember he was talking, I think Max is incredible. He's one of the truly incredible jazz musicians, not all jazz musicians are incredible. A lot of them are just really, really good, but he was one of the incredible ones. And so I was talking to Raul about it. So it's interesting because I said, somebody should make a movie about your dad. It's like, he said, I think somebody's doing something, so as soon as somebody said that, I don't want to cross any lines. Okay, well then you go ahead, but I think it's great. I think when this film, and also he was a jazz musician at a time associated with people who, unfortunately we're going to the time where a lot of them we're losing a lot of them right now. And
we
it's
lost,
important.
After we shot, 2 weeks later, we lost Randy Weston. And then we interviewed Jimmy, and about a year later, Jimmy's gone. And Sonny Rollins, I think I got the last on-camera interview with Sonny Rollins because he won't do anything on camera anymore.
Oh, wow. Wow, he's great too. So in your career here, in your process of life, and now that I know you've got other films, I know about the Blacks in Russia one, and the other, so you've got a number of other films you're working on. In this process of the importance for you of telling these Black stories beyond us just doing them and telling them right, what is it that you bring to the table, Sam? I mean, specifically you, from your personality. And your skills and talent too.
You know what I bring to the table, Craig? Simply this: a love of our people and a love of our history. I think it's invaluable that we know our history and we can dig into it. That to me is important. I mean, I've always loved history, and as I got older and understood that our history as Black people is rich and complicated, to me, it's like an honor to be able to delve into it, to dig into it. Always for me, man. Always. It's a real honor for me. I mean, and it's not that you don't find out things about people that makes you a little skittish, but you find out that people are complicated, they're human beings, that they have, flaws and stuff. And it's your job, from my perspective, is to present them, flaws and all, but not to present them the way you say, oh, I got this gotcha on me. Look how horrible he was. Look how horrible she was. No. You just want to show that as a human being in this world, man, none of us walk on water. Nobody walks on water. We all have our ups and downs, and you can still do phenomenal things, even with the ups and downs of life.
Yeah, I think that's good. I mean, everybody has their own Achilles heel.
Exactly.
In this day and age that we're in right now, before we're going to conclude here in a minute, these are, as we started this out, these are tough times, specifically tough times for Black people who've been around for a while and have seen this consistent assault and I was talking to one of my brothers about this, is that, you know, we can't give up. We were talking, I was hoping, you know, I saw my grandparents go through this. I saw my parents go through this. I was hoping that in my life, we'd be able to sort of cross into another level. I know that's not going to happen in my lifetime. I hope that it can happen in my children's lifetime, but I'm not totally sure of that. What is it that you feel and see for the future of America, who obviously is a racist country, and hopefully it's not doomed to its racist culture, to the destruction of it? What do you feel is the positive aspects of this?
I feel the same way you do, man. I feel like, you know, we have to constantly fight, you know, to be recognized, to be respected. And like you, I thought that the 60s were like, wow, things are going to really get better in America for Black people, you know. But here we are in 2021, and you've seen, like I've seen in the past year, you know, Black men and women shot down on the street, with the, even with the body cams not mattering at all. You know, last week we saw a young man who had been shot in the back. You know, the police officer, no charges. I mean, the material, the evidence was clearly there. You know, so but like you know, Craig, you know, I have children, I have grandchildren, and I hope I hope that people will hopefully see we need to figure out how to make this a better place to live, because if not, we're heading down a very dark tunnel, which where there'll be no hope back.
Yeah, yeah. This is what we were talking about, is that it's not like it's going to, it's not, it can't ever, we can't go back into the box. I mean,
No.
Black Americans cannot go back into the box, you know, and it's like it has to change, or there is destruction. I mean, you know, of a culture, because America is an idea, it's a concept, it's based on
That's
trust
right.
and belief
Right.
and faith. And
That's right.
once that's lost in a significant group of people, because people have to understand, Black Americans have a significant involvement in the development of America, perhaps more so than people understand, in the culture of America. If we have to have this, has to come to fruition at some point in time, sooner than later.
Absolutely, man. Because if we don't, man, you know, our people have been down this road. We know what's down there. You know?
Yeah.
And you know, it's that struggle. It's always going to be a struggle. It's never going to be an easy path. You know, not in this country.
Yeah. Well, I want to again, Sam. It's been too long since we've actually seen each other, so I'm really happy that we could do this thing soon.
Didn't we have dinner in the restaurant on 57th Street?
Yes, we did. Yeah, exactly. That was the last time, because we did
Gordon Parks at the DGA.
We did the DGA thing together. Yeah, that was the last time. So, but I'm glad we're talking again and seeing each other again. I want to thank you for doing this. This organization, the Film Society. I also want to hopefully we can get some of your films into our screening, but also into the film festival. Since you got like 6 or 7 of them on the way coming, so we'll pick something that makes sense for us. Cool. But again, thank you for this conversation. You know, this is the Film Society. I want to thank Penny and Bill George Foundation. I want to thank Kelly and Mike Palmer and Knock for bringing this to. I want to thank the members of the Film Society for allowing us to do this, We the People conversations. I really, really, truly pray that people open their eyes and see that America still has hope, and there's still potential for us to be better, and these conversations are part of that. So thank you, Sam. I appreciate it. And again, go to Lincoln Center and see your work. I wish, you know, this is one of the things that you know, I've always gone to New York, except for I haven't been out of this house for a year. So, you know, but
I haven't been on a plane since December of 2019, man.
Yeah, it's crazy. So hopefully we'll see each other in real life at some point in time in the future. So, all right. Take care, brother. Love you. Bye.